almost every energy production thing has negative byproducts. You think about a car, a gas engine going down the road, and it's got the exhaust handled mostly by a catalytic converter. You've got a power plant with a smokestack that's got scrubbers in it, like to manage those. Well, the scrubbers for the mitochondria are the glutathione and the melatonin, two key antioxidants. And now you're adding this third one, which has a very different function than those two. And we've been trying to figure out, okay, what could cause head to toe improvements? And the reality is, if you can improve how your every cell in your body generates energy and manages the byproducts of that energy generation, then yeah, that explains head to toe improvement.
And good afternoon, everyone. So glad you're here and spending your valuable time with us once again. We're going to try to pass on some pertinent information, especially as the world's changing. You know, your body is going to be the main thing that's going to keep you going through this, as well as your mind. But again, I can't say it enough. It's going to take a combination of both of those to even allow you to have the motivation to get up in the morning to do something. If your mind's okay and your body not, well, you can work on that. And once you get those two in a synergistic flow, then that's kind of when, you know, things stay together. And no matter how strange the world becomes as we change into this new, whatever variable, iteration, there's like probably 50 different words you could use about the way our world's twisting into something new and different. Remember, you know, your body's you're gonna have to keep your body and your health up during this time. And you go through every chapter of history, the people who didn't make it didn't keep their bodies functional. So that's the way I want to kind of preface this here. And just it's an information flow and an exchange of ideas, and take from it what you will and what you can use. And so again, we've got Chris and Patty with me. Now I had a list of questions here, a couple of them. And thank you for putting the comments in the comment box like I asked last time. So most of these questions here are from the comment box from everybody who listened, and also on our Thursday night live radio program when we talked about C60 for a minute, along with others, different kind of treatments and things that could be used moving forward. We had a whole segment on that for like 20 minutes. So those also, when you were conversing in the comment boxes live on the radio, on the show, we grabbed some of those comments too and included them in this list right here. And I had 11 questions. So thank you for putting that. So here we go. Let's start off with the full first question here. Other types of fullerenes exist other than C60. Is it just the number you chose, or why not choose C120, which is two C160s, or like six, like a C360 or a C600, which is 10 of those? Like, why did you stop at the 60 and not just expand it out if it has so many of those awesome effects with it?
All right. So first, David, thank you so much for having us back. And kudos to your audience. I'm probably going to say this more than once because we kind of buzzed through the questions before we got on the show here. These are intelligent questions, like really, really cool stuff. The implication of that question is that we, in some way, stopped at C60, and the reality is nature stopped at C60. If you go back and you look at the original research that was done in the process of discovering C60, and remember, C60 is this soccer ball shaped molecule. I'm holding up a molecule. If you just happen to be listening, it looks like a soccer ball. Imagine the lines on the soccer ball represents the bonds between the carbon atoms, a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. When they discovered it, they actually were vaporizing graphite and taking it into what's called a mass spectrometer, which just looks at the atomic count of each molecule. And really, everything that should come out of it, actually I have a little model here, would kind of look like a flat. This one's a little curved because it's made with the model for a buckyball, but I'm holding like what would appear to be like a flat sheet of graphite. And if you were to make a flat sheet of graphite with variable amounts of carbon molecules, what they noticed was that there was a peak at C60, 60 carbon atoms. And if you're looking at a flat sheet, like why would the fact that there's one extra carbon atom versus not one extra? So think about, why would it be more dominant that C60 exists versus C59 or C61? That was the initial data that led them to believe that that C60 was something different, and then ultimately to try to start assessing it. In fact, the grad student who did that initial study was able to tweak the settings, the pressure settings, and how quickly things were swept into the mass spectrometer, and to create a higher peak than initially seen at C60. And then there was a small peak at C70. And your viewer is exactly right. There are other higher fullerenes. C60 is the most abundant. C70 is the next most abundant, and it's really a slightly rugby ball shape instead of the perfect sphere that is C60. Then you got C76, C84, and you do go on up, and it is theoretical that you could have a C600. They are just not as stable, or maybe the better way to say it is, there's a more stable molecule that happens with easier production, right? So basically, we believe that it's multiple C2 groups, right? So 2 carbon atom groups that tend to start just coalescing, and then they form a C60. Well, C60 is pretty easy to form, as you can imagine, than if you're going to try and construct a C600. And so it's not me. I don't have that kind of power. It is, in fact, that's the naturally occurring molecule in abundance is C60. Now, C70 is available. We can isolate it. It really hasn't been tested. So I wouldn't be consuming C70 at this point, period.
Okay, and interesting, and that dovetails into one of the comments left on. If you could hold that buckyball back up again, somebody wrote and said, hey, it looks like a geodesic dome cut in half.
Exactly. So this is actually called colloquially called a buckyball. The whole gamut of molecules, C60, C70, that more rugby shaped, C76, they're all called fullerenes, and they're named after a guy named Buckminster Fuller, who's a futurist, like just a brilliant mind. He coined the phrase that Earth is just a spaceship flying through space, a giant spaceship flying through space, to kind of change people's perspective on what Earth is in our universe. He brought to prominence the geodesic dome. So he didn't invent it, but nobody was really aware of it until he started talking about it, started promoting it, and it was his kind of movement that caused it to be. I think it was in the 1976 World Fair. There was a giant geodesic dome, and then of course most of us are familiar with the Epcot Center, the geodesic dome there, and those were all brought to prominence by Buckminster Fuller, and they were named after him. Fullerenes, the gamut of molecules, and then buckyballs is the carbon 60 molecule.
Oh, you're going into World's Fairs. Uh-oh. Should we go deep? We're talking about Tartaria and Tesla Technologies, but we'll leave that for another program talking about that. You can check out the Adapt 2030 channel. But, going back into some real science here, C60, incredibly small. Another question is, okay, it can penetrate the cell membranes. Awesome. But can it target specific tissues or organelles was the question. Once it gets in there, can you actually make it target something for a specific cleansing purpose, for a better term?
Yeah. Now, okay. Again, super intelligent question. Kudos to the person who asked this. When you think about tissues, I'm going to address that second. First, organelles. Organelles are really just complex structures in our system, really inside the classic organelle that we often talk about is mitochondria. Inside every cell, we have a mitochondrial organelles, and each cell in our body, except for the hemoglobin cells, have between 50 and 5,000 of these organelles called mitochondria. Those are the energy production organelles in the system. They're what provide the power. The ATP is the power that the cell uses to do its job, whether it's a skin cell, whether it's a liver cell, whether it's a heart cell, kidney cell, whatever it is, it needs that energy, and that organelle mitochondria creates that energy. It actually kind of converts the food that's gotten into our blood system into that ATP. We know from peer-reviewed published research that this molecule, we call it ESS60. If you're going to consume it, we call it ESS60. We know that ESS60 molecule can get inside of the mitochondria, that organelle. And this is very key. I think we've talked about our kind of buffering oxidative stress system, where this works in a very different way than the resident antioxidants. And we also know it happens to be 172. Well, there's an ad hoc study on the web, 172 times more powerful than vitamin C, and a peer-reviewed published research that shows it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So yes, we can get into organelles. Now, when you start talking targeting, this is where it gets really fascinating. So I'm holding that soccer ball cage up again. It's actually big enough for any atom on the periodic chart to fit inside of it, right? And because of that, there's a new symbol in chemistry. So I guess that maybe when you add a symbol to chemistry might be a good indication that you're going to get a Nobel Prize, right? Because the guys who discovered this ended up adding the @ symbol. We're familiar with our email address, right? The @ symbol. Well, now if you have lanthanum, La, at C60, what you have is a lanthanum atom trapped inside of it. Now, this is very different than classic chemistry, because classic chemistry has an ionic or a covalent bond to the exterior. Actually, most molecules don't have exterior. They're just flat or 3D dimensions. They're not closed cage. In the case of the @ symbol, it means lanthanum at C60 trapped inside of that C60 molecule. And what this presented, and this was theorized even back in the 90s, is that we could put radioactive atoms inside of the cage. Most of the chemistry that we use today works, right? So we could actually attach things to the exterior of the cage that might attach to a tissue like a cancer cell. And so you can imagine if this attaches to a cancer cell and you've got a radioactive payload in it, then you're going to be, radiating very specifically cancer cells. So that's extremely exciting. It's also, I don't know if the word unbelievable, but it's almost unbelievably expensive, because in order to get that inside of the cage, you actually have to have that radioactive material around while the cage is forming. So in that initial reactor, and we've manufactured, those are called endahedral fullerenes. And we've manufactured those here at the lab and sold them. But not many people are doing research because it's extremely expensive.
And if I can speak to the people that aren't doctors and medical practitioners that are saying, okay, mumbo jumbo, what is all this about? It's about a miracle molecule that's mixed with an organic oil that people are taking. And the results are better health, improved energy. So on a physical level, what this is a miracle molecule, won the Nobel Prize, that our lab's been making since before it won the Nobel Prize. And now we've kind of mastered the process to be safe for humans and pets. So that's what we're talking about, in case people are like, what is all this? It's about something that can actually help us and our pets live longer, healthier, and sleep better.
Question about stability, because people are talking about bugging out. So now, like if I bug out and I got bottles of C60 here, if it's in the car and, like we got to park somewhere and it said they specifically reference 150 degrees in the car, can the C60 be destroyed inside in the product here, or how does it won't really focus, focus focus over there. The lifespan of olive oil, right, the available time that it's before it goes rancid is typically about 3 years from the moment that it's squeezed, right? So an extra virgin olive oil, which is the only olive oil we use, is a cold pressed olive oil, so it's squeezed out. What causes the decay, the decline of an olive oil is oxidation. So if your bottle is sealed and you have some high temperature exposure for a day, really not a problem. We ship all around the country. It's been extremely hot here in Texas. I don't know how hot it gets in the back of a FedEx or UPS or US Postal Service truck, but it's significantly warmer than the actual ambient air, and we've been hitting 105s here in Houston regularly. So there's really no problem in that situation. And I would say for a day or two, those aren't even things to be concerned about. But if it's been opened and it's been in a car for an extended period of time, I would the reality is if the oil, nothing's going to happen to the ESS60 molecule
If something happens to in fact, the ESS60 molecule is probably going to protect the oil for longer. But if you smell it and just do a quick taste of it, rancid oil isn't really dangerous. It's just, it doesn't taste good. In fact, it tastes extremely bad. And so if it doesn't taste extremely, like, okay, you spit it out because it is so bad. And we've actually had some people like, hey, there's a peppery flavor at the back of my throat. Has it gone rancid? Well, actually, a high quality extra virgin olive oil will leave a peppery flavor at the back of your throat, because that's the polyphenols kind of interacting with the back of your throat. That's actually good. No, it's got to be to the point where like you almost want to throw up, not because there's a little pepper flavor. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and just an FYI, everybody out there too, you know, because in the beginning of COVID, I bought a bunch of stuff. And over the last, say, year, we've been trying to work through some of it and replace stock and rotate things. Lemon juice is another one that goes bad. So you might want to take, you know, the same thing. It'll turn much darker. It'll have a horrible taste with that. So there are other things that you can't keep for such a long period of time, like walnut oil is another one that doesn't really last that long. But the taste test is obviously going to be the way to do it. And that's just for any kind of general thing. If you're going to be storing food and then using it, I mean, use your senses versus just looking at a date on a bottle or something and go, oh, it's bad. My mom does that. She's, oh, it's 2 days old. Okay. And then throws it away. But, you know, that the generated, it's been the advertising and the marketing and the best by dates and the good by dates and the confusing dates have just done their job. So you buy more and consume more.
And I want to mention that we always recommend, in general, keep your bottles away from direct window sunlight and away from a stove or oven direct heat. And you're going to get maximum endurance on that bottle by keeping it just out of sun or in a cabinet.
Well, that's the same with any kind of food preps that you would be storing aside. You know, the same rules apply pretty much across the board then for that. A question somebody wrote in, there's a debate about optimal dosage. How do you establish dosage guidelines?
Yeah, so I think I could answer that question extremely simply, but your questions from your audience have been so intelligent. I'm going to dig.
Well, I rephrased that one a little bit, you know,
yeah,
to make it more professional sounding.
Okay, so I'm going to dig deep into this. So and this is actually the process that I went through, because you know, my company had never taken something that was given to test subjects. In this case, it was Wistar rats, and migrated that to human studies. So our first thought is, well, how many milliliters per kilogram of weight did these rats receive? And then we're like, well, if we just translate that over to humans, it turns out that humans would be taking a cup of olive oil a day. And we're like, okay, well, that can't be right. Why is it wrong? How do we figure out what's wrong? And it turns out that that there's a thing called an allometric calculation. There is a metabolism that a rat has that is very different than the metabolism of a human. And so you do this, and for me, it's extremely geeky to say it actually is related to the surface area. So the surface area of the rat is proportional to the metabolism of the rat, and the same for the surface area of a human. So you take the approximate surface area of these two creatures, and then you get this multiplier. And with that, we've come up with what really worked out is about 1 teaspoon per day. That's 5 mils per day. That's our recommended serving. We actually have a serving calculator on our website. If you weigh a little bit more, then there's a way to kind of enter your weight and check that. And you know, we're constantly looking for feedback, because I've had people. I had a conversation with our one of our kind of a sponsor. He's not a sponsor. He's an athlete who is a proponent of our product, and he's a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion. And my first conversation with him was, he said, "Hey, I was taking 1 serving of your product, and I didn't really notice anything. When I tripled the serving, I was like, wow."
And now on with the video.
Wow, like a big difference. And so there are some people like, that's an ultra, he's running 60 miles in a week. He is an elite ultra athlete and is pushing his body to the limit. So there, you know, everybody's going to fit in some category by their own body weight, by how active they are. And so you can play around with these serving sizes so that it fits you the best.
And I think also the need for detox and the need for additional energy is really important. I'm just a little thing at 5'2", but I take a tablespoon a day minimum. And a lot of people, we always suggest start with a teaspoon. If you've got a sensitive stomach, start with a half a teaspoon and build your way up. But you will notice a change in a teaspoon or a tablespoon, which is 2.5 teaspoons. And the other thing is the concentration levels of these three oils varies very seriously, such as the olive oil is 0.8 milligrams per milliliters. This is going to be the strongest C60, or we sell ESS60, that you can find at 0.8 to 0.86 milligrams per milliliters. The avocado has 0.6, and the MCT, no matter how much we put in it, is going to only hold 0.35 milligrams per milliliters, and the rest will drop to the bottom of the spinning urn that's rotating for 3 weeks for all three oils without any air, light, anything, just keeps going. So ultimately the lab is experimenting to see how much we can get in each oil. And those are the final numbers. So you've got your MCT coconut with a little less than half the olive oil. So people that want a big bang, you want to head for the olive oil, but the MCT is such a great way to start your day and your morning coffee. So it's different for everyone, but I had a lot of detoxing to do. So I do a tablespoon, and then halfway through the day, if I've got a show or two, I'll hit the olive oil as well. So
I think we've got another show. Maybe we should I'm gonna go ahead and take another little serving here.
Well, yeah, I kind of came equipped also, except my open bottles are in the kitchen.
Of course, I'm the geeky scientist who's taking it out of a measuring cup.
Well, I'm going to open a fresh bottle of avocado because this is my new thing. David, what's your favorite flavor?
This one here, you can see it's already down to about half. If you, well, you can't really see through the light. I'll join you on the shot. If you're going to do some, I'll do some with you here. And you can see, see actually right where it is. But I'd go right out of the bottle.
Yeah, you're a man.
That'd be too rough and kind of uncouth, but here we go.
Oh. So 3 different ways to take it. Some ladies take it on a spoon, tablespoon for me.
Yeah, and it's just enough for me when I kind of let it dribble in if my tongue's at the front, where it kind of just encapsulates it there, where it doesn't do too much, where it doesn't really, you know, like you're not drinking the whole bottle, you're getting just a little sip in there.
What was nice is the three of us just did 3 different flavors by choice. You did coconut, I did avocado, Chris did olive. So I mean, they're all so good. You can't lose with any of them, but you're going to get a different level of energy from the olive oil, the strongest. Avocado's pretty close.
So let me ask about the detoxifying then real quick, because, you know, just any quick search, you know, like top organs in your body that you can detoxify, or top, you know, whatever in the body can, like livers, kidney, lungs, skin, colon, gastrointestinal tract. Anything that's sticks out on that list there?
Yeah, the one that sticks out the most is liver. And the reason it sticks out is there's a number of studies, including the original study. So to kind of go back to that original study, remember, they thought this molecule was going to be toxic. They put this molecule in olive oil and they gave it to test subjects, again, Wistar rats. And instead of being toxic, the Wistar rats that received really the C60 Evo formula lived 90% longer than the control group. So the single longest longevity experimental result in history. When I first showed that paper to my director of research, he was like, Chris, this could have easily been 5 separate papers. There was just so many nuances in the paper. And one of those nuances were that with a small cohort of rats, they injected carbon tetrachloride, which is an oxidative stressor, and where it manifests is in the liver. So it oxidatively stresses the liver. It was each, and in that case, there were three groups. One group got water, one group got olive oil, and one group got olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. It was only the group that got the olive oil with the ESS60 molecule that was actually able to recover from that carbon tetrachloride poisoning. And that was recognized by looking at their livers. So there is good research to suggest that this has liver protective effects. And I'm being very mindful, like there's good research to suggest. I'm not saying that we can claim any sort of liver benefits. In fact, it's a good point to interject. The FDA has not evaluated our product. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. That's the first thing. If you think about kidneys, the molecule is not water soluble, although it is such a small particle that it can basically go where it wants. But in terms of having direct impact on the kidney function, you're talking about kidneys are really water filters, right? And so probably not too much there. Lungs, I'm not aware of any data. I do know kind of when we were initially looking at this as a supplement, and is this an industry that we want to get into? One of the tests that they subjected rats to, again, from the concept of, remember the first study was a toxicity study, from the concept of like, if you think about, wow, the name is just the insulation that did all sorts of damage, asbestos. If you think about asbestos, right, if you inhale it, it does damage. So they actually had rats inhale the ESS60 powder, and there was no damage done to them. So I don't know about protective effects, but certainly not doing any damage. And then that's kind of through the list. I think you mentioned one more.
Well, that was just a list I had copied down, was throwing out some different organs there. Lymphatic system, gastrointestinal tract. I mean, that was just, top 10 in the body for a list.
Yeah. And I think if you go back to that fact that it gets into the mitochondria, that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of every cell, that the mitochondria has its own in-house antioxidants to manage the byproducts, right? Like almost every energy production thing has negative byproducts. You think about a car, a gas engine going down the road, and it's got the exhaust handled mostly by a catalytic converter. You've got a power plant with a smokestack that's got scrubbers in it, like to manage those. Well, the scrubbers for the mitochondria are the glutathione and the melatonin, two key antioxidants. And now you're adding this third one, which has a very different function than those two. That would tend to show benefits. I mean, we've always tried to figure out. We have head-to-toe testimonials. These are testimonials. These are not claims. Hair growing in darker. And we've got one influencer whose toe was split in two from like age 5 until like age 55, and it's healed itself since he's been on our product. So literally from head to toe. And we've been trying to figure out, okay, what could cause head to toe improvements? And the reality is, if you can improve how every cell in your body generates energy and manages the byproducts of that energy generation, then yeah, that explains head to toe improvements.
Absolutely, it does. We can go into the different experiments using frequencies from the 1920s forward, and you try to get those cells back into some sort of homeostasis or symbiosis or equality or
equilibrium, right? Like a
equilibrium. Yeah. Thank you for pulling that out of my brain.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit on the 2012 toxicity study, because it was extremely important. And anybody that loves or studies C60, carbon 60, the fullerene, is going to always refer to the Paris-Bakhti study, BAATI, if people want to look it up. It was a study done on toxicity with the rats that Chris was talking about. And the results were phenomenal, because they were looking to see if it was toxic, whereas the results were the rats lived 90% longer that took the ESS60 formula. Not only did they take the formula, but it came from our lab. So we hear about this study, but I just want to say this is the product that was studied. And not only did they live 90% longer, but they died without tumors, these rats. So very rare for Wistar rats to have a longer life and die without tumors, basically unheard of. And the 90% longevity results were the longest longevity test in history on lab animals. And it came from our lab. I just want to point out how important it is that you'll live longer, but also the died without tumors affects me because I think of all the people that are dealing with the big C, and it's a horrible thing. If this can help prevent it, we're not saying it's going to do anything after it's already established in the body. We can't say anything. So these are important things to me on a physical level that are more proactive in advance of getting something than necessarily taking care of it later. And you're talking about prepping. This is like a really great way to prep your body for whatever's coming, rain or shine.
With that payload, you said it's the one atom started with an L at C60.
Mm-hmm. Lanthanum at C60.
Lanthanum, okay. So, you know, a lot of people, because we talk about AI and different types of technologies rolling in on our programs here. That's why I think this comment comes in. Quantum computing now showing potential catalyst, or quantum computing using C60 and the potential of that technology. So do you know anything about this, or what are the quantum effects, or what are researchers exploring on the quantum effects of that? And then a side note, because it is frequency, can 5G affect this C60 molecule, specifically ESS60?
So in terms of quantum effects, I'm aware of the fact that this ESS60 molecule is the largest molecule, right? So it has the most amount of atoms that exhibits quantum behavior. And that's pretty big. Like, you tend to see quantum behavior in much, much smaller particles. And so this ESS60 molecule is showing quantum behavior, like in the classic slit test and those kind of classic quantum physics tests. How it could be utilized in quantum computing? Well, if it's the largest molecule that exhibits that kind of behavior, then it's easier to work with larger molecules. Like, we struggle working with atoms. We certainly struggle, like if you want to get down into quantum particles, we struggle to work with those. We struggle to even observe those, let alone kind of manipulate them. And if we could do that at a larger scale with this C60 molecule, then that's more likely to be a future of quantum computing. So that makes sense. And by the way, this molecule is so amazing. It's got 6-fold symmetry. There's 6 planes through this molecule through which it's symmetrical, and it gives it incredible resilience. You can actually fire it at a plate of steel at 15,000 miles an hour, where most molecules will just shred apart. This one, in my head, I picture it kind of compressing and bouncing right back. So it is an incredibly resilient molecule. So that's the first thing. And then what was the second question?
And along with that, you know, quantum realms, you know, frequencies that are pushed in there. Would 5G affect the C60 or ESS60 molecule?
So I'm unaware of any kind of studies suggesting that. And I think, and this was a while ago, I was looking at the frequency of 5G and how that compares to the actual size of the molecule, right? Because in order really for waves to interact with molecules, you often need to be on the same scale. And this molecule is just so small. It's just so tiny that it's not on the same scale as really any of the frequencies we would be familiar with, including 5G. So I don't think that there would be any cause for concern, and I'm certainly not. There is no research that suggests that there's any cause for concern.
15,000 miles an hour example, because, you know, I could almost envision the military, instead of using depleted uranium rounds out there, they're starting to get C60 rounds to go out.
Yeah. And then you might even get into nanotubes, or another form. I'm going to get, carbon nano geeky here. So nanotubes are, if you imagine the buckyball cage, right? And you split it into that geodesic dome and you separate it, and then you just put this graphite sheet in between it. So now you have a nanotube. And there are some spectacular applications for nanotubes. It turns out, based on the diameter of that tube, just like you can have C60, you can have C84, that would have a different diameter. Different diameters of nanotubes are at a certain diameter, you would be insulative, and at another diameter, you would be conductive. So you literally could have nanoscale wires with an insulator built into them.
It isn't actually a carbon footprint, isn't it?
Yeah, literally, it's literally a
Literally.
carbon ball.
That's funny.
And I love the phrase, the perfect carbon molecule, right? Because it really is. There's a book actually called "The Most Beautiful Molecule" that's written about this soccer ball shaped molecule. It is, it deserves, the guys who discovered it and kind of it on its own deserves a Nobel Prize. Obviously, you can't give a Nobel Prize to a molecule, but the guys who discovered it like deserve that Nobel Prize. It's just an amazing. It's, it may not be, we may not be using much of it now, but there will be a time in the future where like these buckyballs are going to be ubiquitous. They're just extremely expensive to make right now.
Patty, I think we went off on the too sciencey side. Can you bring us back and rope us back in again?
Well, I think it's great. We want to appeal to everyone. For me, I just keep going to the physical, like, what is it going to do for your audience? Because I think ultimately the science is great. It's good to know that this is the only lab that supplied the good stuff for the Paris Bhakti study, and that we're the only lab that's been manufacturing 32 years and selling to research institutions around the world. The edible carbon-60 has only been really known since Chris says 2013. So for me, it's about survival. Some people realize it, some people don't. Those that do are going to need a little mental balance and stamina and emotional balance. That for me is why I take the product also. It's like visible, tactile, and output is really noticeable for somebody like me. I don't do the science. I don't do the shipping. I do the people and the comments and the interactions with you. And David has a personal code. No matter what you get, no matter how many discounts, you're going to get another 10% off with David's code. So follow the link below to get to the website store. We have a ton of products. We also sell the olive oil in capsules for people that travel. You can take a baggie of them on the plane where you can't take a bottle of oil. People are loving feeling better. And I think that's why we're here, is to maximize our lives, not just to live longer, but to live better.
And remember that old adage, when you're prepping, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So think about that as you go through, and whatever, regardless, ESS 60 or your lemon juice or bottles of vinegar or whatever, please keep that in mind. And I'm so serious when I say that. It's more like you need to think about 3s now, because if 2 is 1 and 1 is none, then, why not up at 1 and think about 3? That's kind of the way I go into a supermarket too. When I'm looking at something, I'm going to get 3 cases of something instead of 1, because you're going to blow through that first one and you still want to have a couple extras in the back there for you to rely on. And all this crazy talk of, hyperinflation here, money cut off here, government shuts down there. I mean, how is the world going to continue moving forward? There's a lot of unknowns, but there's a lot of don't get stuck in the fear either, because that's how they want to get you stuck in a tar pit somewhere so you don't come out of that fear. So perhaps none of it's really happening. It's all psychological. It's such the kind of, like you say, 5D warfare world that we're living in. Perhaps none of it's manifesting, only on the computer screen it is, and you're creating that in your mind. But anyway, we are going to need to get ready for these changes, whatever form they take. Yeah, Chris's birthday is coming up. I think he's going to be, 237 years old this year. Is that right, Chris?
It's a big one. 237.
It's a biggie.
It's really important. We're going to have a blowout. Hopefully, and it's not my 237-year-old knee.
Yeah, right. Anyway, I do appreciate y'all listening. Hoping you got something out of our conversation to help you move through your day. Like I say, take for what you want out of this, share with others, and continually resubscribe. I always hate to say that, but the algorithm keeps, 1 adds, 2 delete. It gets in this bicycle chain of add and deletion. So please share with your friends, family, keep the conversation going. And this is, something great to share with others, keeping your health up during these changes. But anyway, bye for now.
Wow.
A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. That's why we must steer our own future. For the last 10,000 years at least, gold has rarely suffered from economic and political crises, as it has always been a stable. Gold is perceived as a symbol of wealth, power, and majesty. Gold has had an exalted position throughout the ages as a highly coveted, even worshipped material. That's why most every major civilization has collected and saved gold. Gold has maintained its worth and usefulness as currency throughout time and will continue to do so. Gold has an important economic role as a means of exchange should currency collapse, insurance that will protect you and your families against financial turmoil of any kind. ITM Trading is a precious metals company that has been in business for over 27 plus years, with a mission to educate and empower individuals to hedge against inflation, mitigate financial risk, and prepare for the Great Reset. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call, 866-834-1422, 866-834-1422.